No one was supposed to survive that battlefield. But then she screamed. The sky had long since turned to ash. Rain hammered the broken earth like it was trying to bury what war had left behind. But something was still alive in the silence, something raw, desperate, and loud. She lay crumpled among the ruins, red-skinned and shivering, her body torn between life and death. Not for herself, for the child inside her. She was a queen once, a conqueror. Now, she was just a woman on the edge of oblivion, screaming for help in a language no human was ever meant to understand. And he heard her. He shouldn't have gone back. He should have let her die, like the others. But the moment he saw her face, he knew something bigger than orders had just begun. Because she wasn't begging. She was entrusting. "Save the child," she said, and her voice cracked not from fear, but from knowing she wouldn't make it. And in that storm, with blood on his hands and thunder in his chest, he made a choice that would change the fate of two worlds. He couldn't remember exactly how he caught her, only that his hands were covered in blood, not knowing if it was hers or the baby's. The wind lashed his face, thick with iron, smoke, and the jagged breath of someone fighting death. She could barely open her eyes now. But her hand that once commanded armies and slaughtered entire colonies, was clinging to his arm like a drowning child. She wasn't screaming anymore, only soft, broken gasps. Each contraction arched her body like lightning through bone. He had never seen childbirth. Never imagined he'd be the one delivering a child, especially not the heir of an alien queen, in the middle of a dying battlefield. Breathe. Just breathe. Like that. Good. He wasn't sure if he was speaking to her or himself. Another lightning strike lit the sky. In that flash, he saw her face, wet with rain and blood, yet her eyes still wide open. Not from pain, but from sheer will. "Don't let them take him," she whispered, not a plea, but a final command from a dying monarch. He nodded. No med team, no supplies, no time, just him and the child. He reached into his soaked pack, trembling, and pulled out a field medkit, outdated, half broken. The scanner blinked red the moment it touched her skin. Anomaly detected, non-human physiology. Risk level, critical. "Damn it," he muttered. "You're not dying on me, not tonight." And there, on a planet already lost, beneath thunder, torn sky, and labored breaths, a human, trained to kill, became the last fragile hope of a dying empire. The rain hadn't stopped. It poured over scorched metal, over cracked bones, over the body of a queen fighting death, and the soldier trying to pull her back from it. But they weren't alone anymore. Somewhere in the static-filled sky, a drone let out a faint whir, barely audible over the thunder. He froze. The child wasn't even born, and already something was coming for it. She opened her mouth again, her voice almost gone. "They sent the Wraithborn." His spine locked. Everyone in the outer sectors knew the name. Silent hunters. The kind you never saw, only felt, seconds before death. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why send assassins for an unborn child?" Althea coughed, blood dripping from her lips. "Because this baby, it's not just royal. It's hybrid. It carries what they fear most. Hope. Hope that two species once enemies might one day share more than war." He looked out into the darkness. The scanner in his wrist beeped 3 life forms, closing in. Fast. No backup, no plan, no choice. He grabbed the emergency pulse rifle from his side and placed it beside her. "Don't move. Don't give up. I'll come back for both of you." Her eyes met his, not with trust, with faith. Then he stepped into the storm. The storm swallowed him whole. Each step sunk into mud and ash, boots pulling free with a squelch that barely masked the rising hum of incoming death. He could feel them now, 3 of them gliding through the wreckage like wraiths, heatless, silent. They weren't soldiers. They were shadows given shape, built to end bloodlines before they began. He ducked behind a collapsed wall, breath tight in his chest. The pulse rifle vibrated against his palms. Rain streaked down his helmet visor. Lightning flashed. For a second, just one, he saw it. Tall, thin, armored in obsidian scales. No face. Only a breathing mask hissing low and steady. He fired. A pulse of blue light cut through the night. Missed. The figure didn't flinch. Didn't run. It vanished. He cursed and spun, heart thudding. This wasn't a fight. It was a hunt. And he was prey. Then a whisper behind him, too close. He dropped, rolled, fired blind. Sparks exploded against the wreckage. And he heard Ida body thud to the ground. 1 down. 2 more. He pressed his back against a smoking hull, blood dripping from a fresh cut on his brow. He thought of her Althea, of the child, of the way she clutched her stomach and whispered, "Save him." He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting to keep something alive that the galaxy had never seen before. And he wasn't planning to lose. She was alone now. The walls around her creaked with every gust of wind. Metal groaned. Dust fell from the fractured ceiling above. The storm was growing worse. But nothing compared to the storm inside her body. Another contraction hit. Harder. Sharper. Like her insides were being torn apart by fire and gravity. She screamed. Not out of fear, but out of defiance. As if sheer force of will might delay the inevitable. But there was no more time. She collapsed onto her side, clutching her stomach, soaked in blood and rain. Her breaths were shallow. Each one sounded like the end of a long war. She reached into the pouch, strapped to her waist. Still there, the small glowing shard. A genetic marker. If the child was born, and she didn't survive, this would prove his bloodline, his right. Her fingers trembled as she pressed it against her skin, programming it to his DNA. She wasn't just birthing a child. She was birthing the future. And it hurt. She gasped. The pressure built again. Bones shifted, muscles stretched. A bolt of pain shot down her spine and tore a cry from her lips. Tears finally came hot, helpless tears. Not for her death, but because he wasn't there. The human. He said he would come back. She wanted to believe him. She had believed him. Another push. The world spun. Her vision flickered like dying starlight. And then she felt it. The baby moved. Alive. Still fighting. Just like her. And so, through clenched teeth and failing strength, she bore down again. One last time. Not for the Empire. Not for duty. But for the child and for the man who saw more than a queen. The moment split in two. Outside, the thunder rolled like distant drums of judgment. Inside, all that remained was pain raw, rhythmic, unstoppable. Her hands clawed the metal floor, slick with blood. Her body trembled. She couldn't breathe. And then, a cry. Tiny, wet, real. The sound cracked through the storm like a blade through silence. She blinked, vision blurred, heart barely beating, but she saw him. Her child, covered in blood and light. He didn't wail like other newborns. He glowed. A soft, pulsing hue lit the space around him. A color she didn't recognize. Not alien. Not human. Something new. She reached for him, her fingers shaking, blood still flowing from her. The baby nestled against her skin, warm, trembling, breathing. She smiled. Even as her body gave way, even as the last of her strength bled into the floor beneath her, she whispered something ancient. A name, one passed down only in dreams. One no empire dared speak aloud. A name that meant bridge, the one who connects. Kyle. Then her head tilted back, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling as if watching stars form from the edges of death. She didn't move again, and just as her breath faded, the doors slammed open. He returned, riven face bruised, bleeding, eyes wild. He froze when he saw her, saw the blood, the stillness, then the child, lying there in her arms, glowing softly against her chest. He dropped to his knees, took the baby into his hands like something holy. He didn't speak, didn't cry. He just held the child and looked at her one last time. "You're not alone," he whispered to the newborn. "Not now, not ever." And outside, the rain finally stopped. He didn't hear the footsteps, but he felt them. The air shifting, the temperature falling, the silence sharpening like a blade pressed against the skin. 3 armored figures stepped into the shattered doorway. Alien, tall, angular, gold-trimmed armor dripping with black rain. Their weapons were drawn, glowing cold and steady. And they saw him, kneeling on blood-stained floor, cradling the glowing child in his arms. Beside the body of their queen, they raised their rifles. He didn't flinch. He pulled the baby close, slowly stood. His armor creaked. His hands didn't shake. One of them stepped forward. A commander, judging by the sigil carved into his chest plate. His voice was deep, ancient, layered with static and sorrow. "You are not one of us." Riven stared at him, eyes like flint. "Neither is he said quietly, nodding to the baby. "But he's both of us. And that's exactly why you don't know what to do right now." A beat of silence. Then the commander raised his rifle again. "That child carries forbidden blood." The council ordered termination. Riven's jaw clenched. He stepped between them and the infant, shielding him with his body. "You'll have to go through me." Another beat. Lightning flared in the distance. Weapons stayed trained on him. Then movement. The second soldier lowered his rifle. Then the third. The commander hesitated. He looked at the child, at the queen's lifeless form, at the human who chose to bleed for something not even his. He lowered his rifle too. "There is no protocol for this." Riven exhaled. "Good, then make a new one." For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the commander stepped forward. He reached into his cloak, pulled out a blade. Riven tensed, but the commander flipped the handle toward him and offered it in silence. A gesture of respect, of recognition, of surrender. Riven took the blade, not as a weapon, but as a symbol. His choice had been made, and the Empire had just made theirs. The storm had passed, but the silence left behind was heavier than the thunder. They stood around her body, Riven the baby in his arms, and 3 alien soldiers who were once her guards, now without orders. No one spoke. The light from the infant's skin pulsed gently, like a second heartbeat against Riven's chest. Then something clicked. A soft chime. A glow from beneath her collarbone. The queen's chest emitted a flicker of light, holographic, soft, pale gold. A projection rose-grainy at first, then clear. Her face, alive, calm, timeless. She had recorded it. Her final words, not just for them, for the galaxy. Her voice floated through the broken chamber, gentle as moonlight. If you are hearing this, then I am gone. But I have not left in silence. For ages, we ruled through fear, through purity, through fire. But fire cannot birth peace, only life can. The image of her hand appeared, resting gently over her stomach. This child is not a weapon. He is not a mistake. He is a choice. Her eyes glistened, even in hologram form. I chose love. I chose unity. And I chose him. The image shifted. Riven's face appeared drawn from memory. This human did not come to conquer us. He came to listen. And when I screamed, he answered. The projection began to fade, but her final words burned brighter than all the rest. Let no one claim this child is unworthy. Let no council erase his right to live. If there is to be peace in our stars, let it begin with him. Silence again. No one moved. Even the air seemed to hesitate, as if giving the moment space to echo deeper. Then, one of the soldiers fell to one knee. Then another. Then the third, not as servants, but as witnesses, as guardians. And Riven, for the first time in his life, realized he wasn't just holding a child, he was holding a future. The transmission faded, but its weight remained, settling over the room like dust in a sacred tomb. Riven looked down at the child in his arms, still glowing, still quiet, still alive. One of the alien guards stepped forward. You cannot stay here. The orbitals will scan this zone within the hour. The council will send more than assassins next time. Riven didn't look up. Then we leave. He walked past them, through the shattered door, into the rain-drenched courtyard, where smoke still curled from cratered ground. One of the alien soldiers followed. We have a ship hidden in the southern ridge, fast, unregistered, built to flee, not to fight. Perfect, Riven muttered. Behind them, the other two began carefully wrapping the queen's body. There would be no royal funeral, no ceremony, but there would be dignity and memory. As the group moved through the ruins, the child stirred in Riven's arms. Tiny fingers reached toward the sky, toward a world not yet built, toward stars that hadn't yet known his name. Riven whispered to him, his voice barely carried by the wind. You don't belong to them. You don't belong to us. You're something new. They reached the ridge as the sun cracked through a broken horizon. Golden light spilled over the cliffs, touching ruins, armor, blood, and a beginning. The ship waded low to the ground, engines pulsing. As they climbed aboard, a final tremor shook the earth behind them. A warning, or a farewell. Riven didn't look back. He held the child closer. The ramp hissed shut, and just before the ship lifted into the sky, he said it aloud, for the first time, KL, your name is KL, and I will get you far enough to matter. They never found the ship. The council scanned the ruins. They questioned the guards. They buried the queen with empty rites, then sealed her name behind stone in silence. But the story slipped through the cracks, like all truths do. They whispered of a human who knelt in blood and lightning, of a queen who died not for power, but for a child she believed would live beyond her war. And of that child, they say he glows, not with magic, not with technology, but with something neither species had words for. Peace, not the kind brokered in treaties, but the kind earned through pain, through loss, through the simple choice to hold life instead of letting it go. Kyle. The name echoed across stars. A name once forbidden, now sacred. Some say the boy was raised among nomads. Others believe he never stopped running. But all who claim to have seen him agree on one thing. Wherever he walks, weapons lower, fires dim, and soldiers forget, just for a moment, what they came to kill for. Because there is something in his eyes that reminds them of what was lost before war became a habit. And behind that boy, always just a step behind, walks a man in battered armor. A human, quiet, watchful, carrying no flag, only the promise he once made in the dark. You're not alone. Not now. Not ever. The galaxy didn't end with fire. It ended with a cry, and began again with a name. In the end, it wasn't the weapons that changed the fate of the galaxy. It wasn't the armies or the councils or the bloodlines. It was a cry, a child's first breath, and the choice of one man who refused to walk away. He didn't save a queen. He didn't save a planet. He saved a single heartbeat, and in doing so, gave the stars a reason to hope again. Some say the war ended that day. Others say it just changed form. But no one denies what they saw. A soldier, a child, and a silence where there should have been fire. And if you listen closely, out there, between the stars, you might still hear it. Not the scream of war, but the whisper of something new being born. This was their story. One of many the galaxy tried to forget. But we remember. And if you do too, then subscribe to Alien Chronicles. Because out there, the next story is already beginning.